So one of the biggest changes coming with Borderlands 4 is the introduction of an Ordinance slot. Now this is taking all of the heavy weapons and your grenades, it's putting them in a new gear slot, so they're no longer going to be taking up weapon slots, let's say if they were a rocket launcher, and they're putting them on a cooldown, so they're also removing any ammo tied to any of the heavy weapons or any grenades. And I think overall this is going to be an incredibly positive change going into Borderlands 4, especially once we start to get into weapon parts and the endgame possibilities with this gear slot. And this is a pretty big departure from all of the previous Borderlands games, except Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, if you consider that a Borderlands game, because you didn't have grenades, you had your spell slot, which actually kind of works in a similar way to this, but all of the other Borderlands games, you had your grenade mod slot where you had actual ammo for your grenades, which means you could spam them as long as you had ammo. Then any of the heavy weapons like grenade launchers, rocket launchers, saw blade launchers, the big machine guns, all that type of stuff were just another weapon that you would put in one of your 4 weapon slots, and they would all have their own ammo as well. So none of that is actually the case with this new Ordinance slot, and instead you're going into cooldowns, which even though you won't be able to spam things like your grenades, or you won't be able to constantly regen ammo for something like a rocket launcher, I think this is overall going to be a lot healthier for the game, but it's also going to allow the items in this slot to be significantly stronger than they were able to be in any previous Borderlands game. Because let's say in a previous Borderlands game, you could hold like 15 total grenades. You would just be able to go spam out 15 grenades pretty quickly, and you would probably be able to get more grenades pretty quickly by opening up more ammo chests or just looting the enemies you killed. So you were able to spam a lot. And this is similar for rocket launchers or other heavy weapons, especially if you had other ways to regenerate your ammo. You could do it even more potentially with something like a rocket launcher, meaning they generally kind of make these things super strong. Like grenades, especially when you go to like Borderlands 3, grenades would end up feeling incredibly weak unless you had a build that was like focused around grenades, which there really weren't that much of after Moe's was nerfed very early on. So realistically, this grenade slot that pretty much everybody in the game was using for a majority of every Borderlands game weren't actually super strong. The main way most people would end up using these through a lot of the games is they would do healing or they would do like a debuff or something. A lot of the other times you just wouldn't use your grenade because they legitimately weren't worth throwing. But in this new Ordinance slot where they're based on a cooldown, they can make them incredibly strong at a baseline, so they're always worth using. The developers even recently mentioned that there's going to be things like throwing out grenades that are essentially nukes that are just going to be able to do ridiculous amounts of damage, and this is going to be the same thing for the rocket launchers or other heavy weapons in this slot as well. They'll be able to make all of these very strong. And we did get a little bit of a glimpse of how some of these could actually be working in terms of how their cooldown works. We got to see a level 24 character using a grenade in this slot, and the grenade had 2 charges, and you could see the charge actually refreshing with a number on it, so you actually have very specific information on that. They would throw a grenade, it would start recharging the next charge, and that's pretty much all that happened with the grenade. But then we also got to see this player use this massive machine gun that had 2 barrels, and what we got to see with that was it was a little bit different. It actually had an ammo count where the grenade charge was before, and this big machine gun held 50 rounds when they were able to use it. It didn't recharge any more ammo after that, and they used this big machine gun, used a bunch of the ammo, and they canceled it early, so they kept I think like 15 rounds, and it seems that canceling early will actually affect the cooldown as well, because it seems that the ammo regen for whatever you're using and the cooldown are synced up. Now I'm presuming that the cooldown number is actually the main thing, and it's just showing you the amount of ammo that you also have. So if there were, say, effects that you could get on the Ordinance slot or other piece of gear that reduces cooldown, it would probably reduce the cooldown and give you that ammo back more quickly, because it also seems you need to be capped out on ammo to actually use the ability again. It didn't seem like you'd be able to just have like 25 out of the 50 rounds on a heavy weapon and use it early. It seems like you needed to be fully refreshed, which is also a little bit different than the grenades, because the grenades is on more of a charge system, so you could actually throw the grenade while another one was on cooldown. And based upon how they're talking about this ordnance slot, it very much sounds like there are going to be ways to build more into the ordnance slot. One of the main ways that I would think you would be able to do that is to reduce the cooldown, either giving you grenade charges back more quickly, or reducing the cooldown, or increasing the ammo regeneration of the heavy weapons in this slot as well. And because they're able to balance these to be much more strong because of this new ordnance slot, I'm very much hoping that there are builds for every single one of the Vault Hunters that just allows you to be focused on the ordnance slot, whether that be grenades, rocket launchers, or grenade launchers, or even miniguns, which we did also get to see in some of the footage that someone was using a minigun that shot incredibly quickly, and having a build focus around just using the minigun from your ordnance slot seems like a lot of fun. But that's not all the information we have, because we recently learned that at least grenades in the ordnance slot are also going to be part of the licensed parts system that was primarily shown to us through weapons in the game. So essentially, you get a weapon that's, say, a Vladoff weapon. It could have 3 different parts from other manufacturers on it, giving you the special effects of those other manufacturers all in the same weapon, giving you ridiculous amounts of crazy possibilities with weapon rolls, and also just giving you ridiculous amounts of things to go farm. And we know now that grenades will also be a part of that system, and I'm betting that all of the other weapons and everything you can put in the ordnance slot is also going to be a part of that system. It already makes sense for all the heavy weapons as well, because they were part of weapon part systems in previous games, because they were just another weapon. So I by no means think that anything that can go in the ordnance slot will not be a part of the licensed part system, but this adds such a ridiculous amount of build possibilities, having the ordnance slots also having these random rolled parts. Like, you could get a grenade with different parts from different manufacturers that could do crazy things. Like, maybe you could get a grenade that throws out a nuke, and maybe you could have like a Molly-Wand part to give it a different element, so now you have like a poison nuke. And maybe you could also get a part from a different manufacturer that also adds like a healing effect to it, so now you have like a poison nuke that also heals depending on how much damage it's dealing. You could get a rocket launcher with some crazy parts with it. Maybe you could get a rocket launcher with Molly-Wand to make it be an elemental rocket launcher, and maybe you could also get like a Vladoff part on it for it's a magazine or something, so now you have a crazy large magazine for your rocket launcher that's also elemental. There's just so many crazy possibilities with the parts system also being on your ordnance slot. And then also remember, like every other slot, or almost every other slot in the game, there are also going to be legendaries for the ordnance slot. I mean, all of the things that go in the ordnance slot in previous games, we've had legendaries for them. Had legendary grenade mods, we've had legendary rocket launchers and all the other heavy weapons because there were weapons. So you're also going to have the added effect of having that be a legendary in that slot, meaning there can just be so many crazy effects. And we also know that how they're building legendaries for Borderlands 4 is that they're going to drop a lot less, but they're actually going to be legendary, meaning they're actually going to be very strong. In a similar way to the ordnance slot, they're going to be much less common, so they can just make them much stronger. So we're just going to have the possibility of getting some crazy legendary rocket launchers with random rolled parts on it that just do something absolutely crazy, similar for grenades and similar for any of the other heavy weapons or machine guns in that slot. So there's just going to be such a ridiculous amount of added possibility with all of these things moving to one ordnance slot compared to what we previously had in other Borderlands games. But that's pretty much all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.